For this week's top 5, I hope you like your metal evil. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, John Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's album art of the week. It's the weekend. That means I'm bringing you my top 5 favorite new metal albums that got released. But before we do the top 5, we got to talk about some of the big major label artists that drop albums. All right, we got to talk about Body Snatchers' new EP, Vile Conduct. This one actually came out on Tuesday instead of the normal Friday. I got my hands on this one early. Y'all know what that means. My written review's already published in Metal Digest. Links in the description to all my writings. And this one really struck a chord with me. You know, when it comes to metal, all these different bands are all touching on these different forms of darkness. We all think of ourselves as dark people, but for most bands, it's an allegory. It's a metaphor. Not this band. They talk about that real darkness. One of the lyrics on this album is, "Fentanyl made me into an only child." Damn. All right, after that heaviness, let's lighten it up a little bit because, good Lord. Let's talk about the debut album from Keith Buckley's new band, Many Eyes, called The Light Age. And I also got my hands on this one early. This was interesting because I wrote in my review, I am equally the worst person there is to review this record as well as the best person there is, because I've never listened to any Every Time I Die. Never on purpose. I don't know what they sound like. Now, that's not me being a hipster. That's not me saying I'm too good to listen to that. I just live in a death metal bubble and it hasn't come across my desk. I'm in a different world. I'm not saying I'm better. But what I am saying is I listened to this record and judged it without any expectations because I haven't heard any of Keith Buckley's previous material. I judged it as a standalone record and I enjoyed it. It's got this punk rock sort of angriness, kind of like The Used, but it's got this like 90s grunge sonic experimentation, a little bit of Radiohead quirkiness. I thought to myself, it gets really heavy, but I thought to myself, rock and roll. It's nice to have a rock and roll album. And one more before we jump into the top 5. Peeling Flesh has a new record called The G Code. And this one caught me off guard because this band has a high number of monthly Spotify listeners. Now, 178.6 thousand listeners a month would be really high for a metal band, period. But this is a slam/brutal death metal band. For a brutal death metal band, 178,000 a month is astronomical because brutal death metal doesn't really have a wide appeal like that. But this band has broken through somehow. Now, my theory, you let me know what you think in the comments, but my theory is because of their use of samples and the hip hop influence. I'm not sure why they're so popular. What I do know is it's heavy and it rules. Now let's do the top 5. Coming in at number 5 is this Fugit. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Text on the screen just in case. And as always, every band's Bandcamp link will be in the description so that these records are easy to find. This one's called Astral Consciousness. It is black metal / dark ambient music out of Italy. And when I see that sort of description, immediately I'm like, I'm probably not gonna like this. Well, I was wrong. I love this. So when it's doing black metal, it does it very well, super heavy, and I love the vocals on this one. It's not that screechy, shrill sort of black metal vocals. And then when the dark ambient parts come in, it's not just some nerd on the synth. These are actually well-composed music with counterpoint melody and harmony and multiple movements. I'm like, oh wow, they're real musicians. I was wrong. That's why I go ahead and listen to them even when I do prejudge them, because I'm wrong all the time. Coming in at number 4, Harzo Decomposed Beyond Recognition, death metal out of Croatia. This is some thrashy death metal and evil. This one's really obsessed with serial killers. It's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable because of the violence towards women. And to be honest, it makes me a little uncomfortable too, but that's okay. I don't mind being uncomfortable when it comes to death metal, as long as 100% of their catalog isn't violence against women. That's weird. That makes me wonder about you as people. If you do violence against men as well, okay, violence against everybody in our death metal. Let's be inclusive with the murder and the mayhem, yeah? Okay, and there's some surprises on this record too. There's this song, Handsome Devil, and when it starts, I was like, oh, this is black and roll. And then it goes back into the death metal. That's the sort of musical novelty that's gonna get me every time. This one's heavy. Coming in at number 3, Obstetra. Again, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correct. Here's the text on the screen. Nuclear power violence, grindcore out of Spain. Now, I'm one of them type people where I don't normally like much grindcore, but these guys actually turned their snare on and laid off of it a little bit. In fact, grindcore aficionados would say, well, that's not really grindcore, because it's really like a Venn diagram. There's a lot of death metal in this and grind. But that's why I like it, because it's groovy, it's tight and punchy. It's not this chaotic cacophony. You know, I can actually hear the articulation in the instruments and the vocals. So it goes to the extreme end, but it goes about as far as I'm willing to go before it stops being musical. I like it. Coming in at number 2, Wolfheart, Draconian Darkness, Melodic Death Metal out of Finland. Now these guys have been doing it for about 10 years now, so as you'd expect, they've gotten pretty good at it. Really tight and punchy songwriting on this one. You know, they make good melodic decisions. I like how, yes, there's an orchestra, but it's not just the tonic notes being held on a synth that sounds like strings. It's actually composed, providing counter melody to what the guitars are doing. There's a clean singer, but it's not that mellow death where, you know, the verses have harsh and then the chorus has clean to make it accessible. No, the clean is there so that there's peaks and valleys that can build to the next crescendo with roaring. In fact, a lot of these choruses have both clean and harsh vocals at the same time in harmony, which is excellent. I'm just super impressed with this one, Wolfheart. And hey, before we do number 1, just one, maybe the second to last reminder that summer ends on September 20th. September 20th is the last day of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and that will be the end of the Heavy Metal Philosophy summer collection on the merch store. It will never go back up there again. I will collab with Nocturno in the future on other projects, but this design, gone forever. Now, don't worry, I'm coming up with new designs in the fall. Eventually, it's not going to be September the 21st. It's going to take me some time. Your boy's got 4 jobs. I got a gig coming up. I'll get to it, I promise. But September the 20th is the end of the summer, gone. So, johnbarbas-shop.fourthwall.com, links in the description. Now let's do number 1. If you watch this week's podcast, number 1 should come as no surprise to you. God dethroned the Judas Paradox. It's my favorite genre of metal, Black and Death, and then it does something interesting philosophically, so you know I'm absolutely all over this one. The Judas Paradox tells the story of Judas through Judas's point of view, and Judas says that, dude, Jesus could see the future. So did I really have free will? I was just a pawn in him and his daddy's plan. You know, I had to do this for him to be able to sacrifice for all of you. I don't deserve this bad rap that I got. And I find that super interesting because indeed, if God knows the future, if he knows what all of us are going to do we really have free will? I don't know. And what's interesting about this is the Judas Paradox, the single, it's got this, you know, it's not that furious sort of black and death metal sound. It sounds forlorn. It's a lament. But then as the album opens up, it gets more and more. The BPM rises, the fury rises. So the album really has like 2 distinct deliveries in the first half and the second half, but they all come back to the same message. question everything the church has told you. Now, we still got Dealer's Choice and the album art of the week, so don't go anywhere. For this week's Dealer's Choice, I'm picking Vestige with Janus. This is post-metal / progressive metalcore out of France. Now, why did I sound unsure when I said that? Well, part of this is pretty easy to nail down. You can immediately hear that shoegazy Deftones influence in this, but then when they get heavy, the influences are a bit harder to pin down like that. You know, the rhythms are unorthodox, and you know, the lead singer, he can do that Chino breathy vocal, but then he'll also do a deep false chord scream that Chino will never do. So with the wide variety of sound and the thickness of the atmosphere, I just found myself listening to this and going, "Oh, what's that?" over and over again, which is why I loved it. Well, except for this one thing. The intro track is 3 minutes and change of ambient sound. That's ironically titled Different. I hate those. Bands, if you want to be different, skip the ambient or orchestral intro track to your albums. So first of all, if I'm listening to your band for the first time ever, that's not a good first impression. And second of all, if I'm a fan of your band and I want to listen to your records, that song right there is going to get skipped every single time. I'm going to go right into the actual music that I like. So why waste a track on the album on that? If you want to be different, get into it right away. Now, let's do the album art of the week. And my favorite album art this week comes from Moose Cult, Book of the Machines. Now look at this and tell me that doesn't scream John Barbas. You got a wizard with antlers, and he's looking at a book, and you know, I'm not sure if the eldritch horror tentacles, but they're kind of technology a little bit, are coming out of the wizard pouring into the book, or out of the book pouring into the wizard. Either way, there's some sort of magical, dastardly data transfer going on between the wizard and this forbidden tome. It kind of reminds me of the Agma Infinium from Elder Scrolls. Yeah, definitely nerding out over this. Plus, pretty cool doom metal out of the UK, so y'all check out Moose Cult. And if you were curious about what I said earlier about that album, the Judas Paradox, being the story of Judas told from his point of view, and him saying, "Yo, I didn't have any free will, God made me do it. Don't give me the bad rap. You shouldn't call me the betrayer." If you're curious about that, well, I sat down with Henry Sattler, the lead singer and chief songwriter of God Dethroned, and we talked about it. We talked about free will. We talked about production in black metal, all kinds of metal things. Just click right here. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.